Early 1950s. A few minutes before sunrise, in a rural province of the Philippines, the night was still holding on. There was no electricity yet, no radio signals cutting through the dark, only insects, palm leaves shifting in the wind, and the quiet awareness that everyone was waiting for daylight. A farmer stepped onto a dirt path he took every morning. He had walked it for years. That morning, he stopped. A body lay ahead of him, positioned deliberately, out in the open. There were no signs of a struggle. No neighbors reported hearing anything during the night. No shouts, no gunfire. When people gathered closer, they noticed something that didn't fit any explanation they knew. The neck bore unusual marks, and the body, according to those present, showed no trace of blood. Authorities found nothing else. No shell casings, no tracks leading away, no witnesses who could offer a timeline. By sunset, the facts no longer mattered. The story had already taken shape, moving quietly at first, then everywhere at once, passed between homes, carried through fields, spoken only after dark. The aswang was back, and something was hunting again. There were no signs of a firefight, no spent cartridges, no warning shots in the night, only the body, left deliberately where it would be discovered. By the end of the day, people were no longer asking who killed him. They were asking what had done it. The answer, to many, was already familiar: the aswang. In Filipino folklore, the aswang is not a single creature, but a category of fear, a shapeshifter, a predator that blends in during the day and hunts at night. It feeds on blood, it stalks rural communities, and it leaves behind bodies that seem drained of life itself. For generations, these stories had been told not as entertainment, but as warnings. They explained disappearances, sudden deaths, and the feeling that something unseen moved just beyond the reach of lantern light. By the time the rumors began spreading in this particular region, the Philippines was already living inside another kind of fear. The country had gained formal independence from the United States in 1946, but the scars of occupation, war, and poverty were still fresh. World War II had devastated the countryside. Infrastructure was fragile, trust in institutions was thin, and a new conflict was taking hold. The Hukbalap, commonly known as the Hooks, were a communist-led guerrilla movement that had emerged during the Japanese occupation. After the war, instead of disbanding, they turned their weapons against the Philippine government. In many rural areas, the Hooks were not outsiders. They were neighbors, relatives, sons who had gone into the hills. They offered protection, justice, and redistribution in places where the state often offered nothing. By the early 1950s, large parts of the countryside were effectively beyond government control. From Washington's perspective, this was intolerable. The Cold War had hardened into something permanent. China had gone communist. The Korean War was underway. American policymakers feared a domino effect across Asia. The Philippines, a former U.S. colony and a strategic ally, was seen as a frontline state. So the United States intervened. Not with an invasion, but with advisors, funding, training, and intelligence support. Among the Americans sent to assist the Philippine government was an Air Force officer named Edward Lansdale. Officially, Lansdale was a military advisor. In practice, he was deeply involved in intelligence and psychological operations. Lansdale believed that insurgencies were not defeated primarily through force. He believed they were defeated by undermining legitimacy, morale, and belief. To him, the battlefield was not just terrain, it was perception. And perception, he understood, was shaped by culture. Rather than dismissing local beliefs as irrational, Lansdale and others studied them. They asked what people feared, what they respected, and what stories already existed that could be turned against the insurgents. In the Philippine countryside, where electricity was rare and modern communications limited, folklore remained a powerful organizing force. Fear of the aswang was not marginal, it was woven into everyday life. According to Lansdale's later accounts, U.S. advisors worked with Philippine forces to design psychological operations tailored to these beliefs. The aim was not mass terror, it was targeted demoralization. The objective was to make specific hook units abandon areas they controlled without costly battles. The method was simple and deeply unsettling. First came the rumors, quiet, untraceable. Stories of livestock found dead with strange wounds, of villagers hearing noises in the trees at night, of shadows that did not move like people. These rumors were never officially confirmed or denied. They were allowed to grow on their own, spreading through informal networks of trust. Then came the demonstration. One Huk guerrilla was captured or ambushed and killed. His body was reportedly altered to resemble the work of a vampire. Puncture wounds to the neck, blood drained, the corpse left in a visible location. There was no claim of responsibility, no political message, no warning to the group, just the implication that something unnatural was hunting them. When members of the Huk unit found the body, they did not interpret it as a government execution. Within the cultural framework they lived in, it confirmed the rumors. The land itself had become hostile. Whatever had once protected them in the villages no longer did. According to Lansdale, the effect was immediate. The Huk unit abandoned the area. They did not attempt to reassert control. They did not seek revenge. They left, driven not by military pressure, but by fear of what waited for them in the dark. This story, repeated in Lansdale's memoirs and interviews, has become one of the most cited examples of Cold War psychological warfare. At the same time, it remains difficult to fully verify. There is no single declassified CIA document detailing the operation step by step. Much of the evidence is anecdotal, filtered through the perspective of the man who claimed credit for it. Some historians argue the account may be exaggerated, simplified, or symbolic of broader tactics rather than a single incident. Others note that similar methods were used in counterinsurgency campaigns elsewhere, adapting local myths to destabilize insurgent support. What is not in dispute is that U.S. counterinsurgency doctrine in the Philippines explicitly emphasized psychological operations. Manuals and training programs focused on rumor control, perception management, and the manipulation of belief. The goal was to separate guerrillas from the population, not only through force, but through fear and uncertainty. In that context, the vampire panic fits a pattern. The broader campaign against the Huks combined reforms, military action, and psychological pressure. Ramon Magsaysay, supported by U.S. advisors, ran a populist campaign that promised clean government and rural development. Over time, the insurgency weakened. Some fighters surrendered, others were killed. Many simply disappeared back into civilian life. From a strategic standpoint, the operation was considered a success. The Philippines remained aligned with the United States. The feared communist takeover never materialized. But psychological operations leave traces that are harder to measure than territory or body counts. Fear, once introduced, does not remain neatly contained within its original target. It seeps outward. It attaches itself to memories, to stories, to inherited warnings passed from one generation to the next. Even decades later, belief in the aswang persists in many parts of the Philippines. It has adapted to modern life, surviving alongside smartphones, highways, and social media. The vampire panic of the 1950s reveals something fundamental about modern power. Intelligence agencies did not eliminate superstition, they recognized its utility. They learned how to align ancient fears with contemporary political goals. This was not about belief in monsters by the people who planned it. It was about understanding that belief itself is a force, that when institutions are weak and uncertainty is high, stories can move populations more effectively than orders. This incident also raises uncomfortable questions. If fear can be manufactured so easily, how often has it been used elsewhere? How many conflicts have been shaped not only by weapons and strategy, but by rumors designed to feel organic, inevitable, and beyond human control? The line between folklore and psychological warfare is thin. Once crossed, it becomes difficult to tell where one ends and the other begins. In the Philippine countryside in the early years of the Cold War, that line disappeared into the night, and what remained was a lesson that intelligence agencies would carry forward into future conflicts. Sometimes the most effective way to defeat an enemy is not to confront them directly, but to convince them that something far worse is already waiting.